Hi listeners, Jason here. We are excited to finally announce registrations for the biggest psych health and safety community event ever. The inaugural The Psych Health and Safety Conference will be held at the Sofitel Wentworth, Sydney, June 19 to 20, 2024 and offer concurrent virtual attendance. It'll feature live podcast recordings with OG researchers including Christina Maslach and Michael Leiter of Burnout fame, Psych Health and Safety USA podcast host I. David Daniels, Australian super experts including the likes of David Burrows, a special 10-year anniversary integrated approaches to workplace mental health panel with authors Tony LaMontagne, Angela Martin and Kat Page, hand-picked case studies from organisations doing it well, and a very special interview with plaintiff Zagi Kozarov by Catherine Dunlop on that High Court case which we previously covered on the podcast. This event will sell out. Get in quick to secure tickets at early bird prices for the 2-day conference, pre-conference masterclasses, and the VIP dinner. The first 200 in-person registrations also get a copy of her latest book, The Burnout Challenge, signed by Christina Maslach herself. Find out more and register at www.psychhealthandsafetyconference.com. Now, on to this episode.
From Flourish DX, this is the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. With workplace mental health becoming a safety prerogative, this is the source of information on psychological injury prevention and health promotion.
Hi, and welcome to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. My name is Jason Van Schie, and I'm one of the hosts of the show. The aim of the podcast is to rapidly increase the knowledge and application of psychological health and safety in workplaces worldwide. To help with this, we have regular guests from around the world who are leading the way in this important area. But before I introduce our guest and topic for today, allow me to introduce my co-host, Joelle Mitchell. How are you today, Joelle?
I'm better than I was this time last week.
And I was really worried about you last week. I think I could probably count on one hand over the last 3 years how many sick days you've had.
Yeah.
And you were knocked out for the whole week last week.
I was. It was awful. Yeah.
Yeah. You are looking more alive now.
Thanks.
Yeah. But it feels like so long since we last recorded a podcast together.
Yeah, it has been quite a while, I think.
Yeah, it was David's episode, the last one that we did.
Paula.
Oh, yeah. No, it feels like a month. So even though listeners are getting this, on a weekly cadence.
We recorded with Paula on Are You OK Day.
Yeah. What day is that?
I don't know.
September. Yeah, that was.
A month ago?
Yeah, over a month ago.
There you go.
Yeah, crazy. Right, but besides, almost dying from a virus.
I didn't nearly almost die, listeners. I didn't need the hospital or anything other than some painkillers to manage the fever.
Yeah.
Although, if I'd been like one of the Bronte sisters, I probably would have died.
Yeah, or maybe if you're like in 500 AD
That's
or
sort
something.
of what I was getting at, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know who the Bronte sisters are. That's like way too highbrow for me.
Yeah, that's a good point. I should have come up with a different reference for that.
Yeah, anything from the MCU would be good.
That wouldn't help.
Not help you. You don't
Doesn't help to set a historical context to something.
No, not at all. They do have time travel in MCU, just saying. So.
Do they have time travel or is it dimensional travel?
Both now. It's great.
Okay.
Yeah, not confusing at all.
No.
Anyway, our guests and guests with plural are patiently waiting, so we should probably let them in.
Yeah.
Okay. So today we're going to be speaking with a research team from the University of Western Australia, so just around the corner from where we are in Bentley in WA. So we've got three people. We have got Dr. Aleksandra Luksyte. She's an associate professor at the UWA Business School. We have Dr. Stijn Masschelein, who is a senior lecturer in accounting at UWA, and Dr. Joseph Carpini, who is a lecturer at the UWA Business School. So a very warm welcome to the three of you today.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll see how we go with this one.
Okay. It's unusual for us to have three guests on.
Yeah.
At the same time.
We'll do our best with these questions. So the first thing that we like to ask our guests, given that we are a podcast, is what podcasts do you like to listen to? So maybe start with Alex.
Oh, okay. So let me open my podcast. So I personally, I love podcasts. And do you want all of them or my maybe top 3 podcasts?
Let's go top 3.
Yeah, you sound
Top
like
3.
you like podcasts a lot. So we don't have all day. It's not a show about podcasts.
I love it.
Top 3 is good.
So first of all, I always listen to Work Life with Adam Grant because it's based on research, and it's a good experience how to talk about, because you often, he talks about research articles and you're just amazed how he can translate those articles into digestible form. I love the revisionist history with Malcolm Gladwell. Because Malcolm is such a wonderful presenter. He can talk about a table in such an engaging way that you're just amazed how interesting it is. And I also, so here, my third one is The Hidden Brain. So it's another podcast about, again, research, but not just about work research, but any human behavior. So these are my top 3 podcasts.
Very good, and popular choices for sure. What about you, Stijn?
Yeah, I also listen to a lot of podcasts. Luckily, different ones, so we're gonna give a different top 3. But my favorite one at the moment is a history of rock music in 500 songs, and
Nice.
it's a really, really well researched overview of popular rock music since the 50s. He's about at the end of the 60s now, so it's a multi-year project. But it's really well researched. It's really well, it's a really good history. And I like podcasts that are deep dives, like podcasts that go for 2-3 hours. I like those. And so the other sort of group of podcasts that I like to listen to is about financial heists and frauds and crypto. So there's a couple of that, but the last one that I listened to was the Lazarus heist, which is about North Korean hackers by the BBC. And that I thought was really good, very broad perspective. And sort of the news one that I like to follow the most is Odd Lots from Bloomberg, which focuses on financial news, but it's goes very deep into like a certain industry. One year, the logging was one that was very popular, logging in the US. Because that had all kind of implications for inflation and so on. So they like to do those deep dives as well with the specialists, which I really like. So those are my three top ones at the moment.
Nice. I might check out that music one. That sounds quite interesting
Should.
for me. Thank you. And Joseph?
Oh, well, now I feel like the odd one out because podcasts are not necessarily my jam. I actually assigned them as part of my my units. So I assigned things like TED Talks to my students. But the one that I listen to most regularly for podcasts really is around The Work Life by Adam Grant. And there's a couple others that are more on the fringy side of things, but those ones are the ones that I most enjoy, just learning about different topics.
Yep. And it's good to see that lecturers are sort of assigning different and novel types of sources of information for classes as well. That certainly wasn't done back when I was a student.
What, you didn't enjoy reading all those journal articles?
No. And the textbooks as well, having to buy the new textbook every year that's had like 5 words changed in it to create a new edition.
Yeah, that's because the lecturer assigned his book.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. Oh, you've done that, Stijn, have you?
I am doing that. I'm writing a textbook, but it's open source. It's free, completely free.
We'll
so
forgive you.
I thought all the times are changing.
Yeah, good man.
Always
Joseph
appreciated
just
when
finished his textbook, right, Joseph?
Did. I just finished revamping the Human Resource Management textbook for Australia and New Zealand by Wiley. And unfortunately, no, Stave, ours is not open source. But we changed a whole lot on it, and we're really happy with the amount that we've changed. So it's the most substantial change. As Joelle mentioned, oftentimes we're guilty of very small changes in textbook editions, but this one, we've made massive changes. So it's the first edition since its original publication with this amount of new content in it, including an entire section about mental health in the workplace, where previously, it was just kind of a blurb here or there, a little sentence that it mattered. So really trying to keep up with the times.
Awesome.
Good. And good to have somebody with that business psychology credentials managing that change to a HR textbook as well. So, all right. The next question that I have for all of you is about your professional careers. So maybe if we can do like a sort of the maybe the elevator pitch version of your professional careers, and I might go in reverse this time. So maybe starting with Joseph.
Excellent. Well, my career has been pretty straightforward. You know, very typical, just kind of did my undergrad and then my master's and my PhD in organizational behavior. And my story is quite kind of a flip-flop between psychology and management. So I did undergrad in psychology, but then I moved into management for my master's and then realized that I missed psychology. So then I started a PhD in org psych and then switched back to finish my PhD in organizational behavior at the University of Western Australia. But along the way, I've worked a lot with industry partners. So a lot of the research that I do, even though I haven't worked for a lot of industry, on the payroll, but I really love the fact that a lot of the research that I do is very much grounded in real organizations. So doing the research with those real companies. So I've worked with a variety of companies like the Government of Canada, Fiona Stanley Hospital, a lot of the different hospitals here in Western Australia and Australia, and kind of groups like Nexia, which is the study that we're going to be talking about a little bit later.
Yeah, fantastic. And applied research is so valuable. So that's great to hear that you're doing that. Stijn, your professional career, please.
I did my PhD. So immediately after my master's, I did a PhD. Also didn't work in industry. I did my PhD in Belgium for 4 years. And then I moved here. I got a job here at WA in the business school. That's about 12 years ago. So my actual professional career has been here in WA as well. In contrast to Joseph, I am much more focused on like theoretical contribution, methodology. But obviously, I like to work with people like Joseph and Alex who are working in industry. But I think like in my professional career has moved into I'm sort of the methods guy on the applied project. And I've worked with people in psychology. I've worked in pure, much more economic focused and it's more that theoretical or methodological background that gives me the opportunity to work on different projects, and that's what I like. That I can be that basis.
Yeah, and a robust method is vital to good quality research. So very important role there. And Alex, what about you?
So maybe my professional career wasn't as straightforward as Joseph because when I got my bachelor degree in linguistics, actually from Lithuania, this is where I am from. So I worked as a human resource manager for 2 years in a relatively according to Lithuanian standards organization. And after 2 years, I felt that I reached a ceiling and I wanted some I had lots of applied experience and I really wanted some theoretical background to what I felt I was doing in the organization. And I won a Fulbright scholarship to go to the United States, and I went to California, UC Berkeley, and I did a research on different motivational profiles for people who were growing up in the Soviet Union, and then when Soviet Union collapsed and how their motivation differed. And then I received my PhD in industrial organizational psychology at the University of Houston. And then I started looking for a job anywhere in the world. And that's, I think, the beauty of our academic jobs. You can apply for jobs anywhere. So I was applying Canada, United States, Europe, Singapore, Australia, and I was very lucky that that was my first job from after my PhD. So actually, Stijn, I think we started together 12 years ago. So this is my academic job, and my professional academic career has been here in the University of Western Australia. And so I think, yes, I'm similar to Joseph, so that I do research with organizations. And for example, currently I'm working with this non-for-profit organization called She Runs. And it's about what we can do to help women to apply, not just apply, to run for political offices. What are some barriers? What are some support systems? So it's this is a long-term project. So I started collaborating with them in 2020, yeah, so 4 years ago. So, and each year we are doing these campaign schools, and I'm collecting data. So, and also then collaborating with Joseph and Stijn, so on other projects, including next year.
Yeah, that's a really interesting area. Yeah, women in politics, but not unfortunately not what we're here to talk about today.
No. Maybe a podcast for another day.
Perhaps.
Yeah. You kind of covered a little bit of it off, but it'd just be good to, again, maybe get a highlights package of, I guess, your current areas of research at the moment. We'll get into more detail about a specific research project that you did that brought you guys to Joelle's attention in particular. But maybe starting with Stijn, what are you currently working on?
So what I'm really interested in, and certainly how it relates to today, is how decisions like working from home, management decisions, how they work together, interact with other decisions that firms are making, like how the employees are rewarded, how training works, how they are hired, because the type of people that you have in your organization might be influencing how they're going to use work from home policies, which we're planning on talking about. And it's sort of easier to experiment and look at one thing at a time, but which data you can use, how to investigate questions that sort of look at these interactions is a bit more difficult. And I think, in my opinion, the academic research has not really developed a lot of ways of doing that. So that's what I'm interested in. And that's what a lot of my PhD students are doing, different things, information systems, how they work together, hiring and management policies, how they work together. But that's basically what I'm interested in. That's my overarching theme.
Yeah, and that's really fascinating area of research. Like you say, I think a lot of research is focused on discrete kind of interventions, like if we give people more autonomy or we do a workload intervention or we use a technology intervention, what's the benefit? But then looking at all the other systems that then goes on to affect. And a really great example of that is we heard recently that the Queensland government were going to give people 5 days 5 days off in additional to sick leave in order to deal with psychological distress. And, that's great. But we also hear from government workers that they've got work overload and there is not enough resources. So what does giving 5 days off to people actually do to that already, experience of overwork? So it's interesting.
Yeah, that's basically the thing that I'm interested in, how a bundle of policies is sometimes necessary. Like sometimes to make a big change, you kind of need to change more than one thing at a time. Like, I guess we're going to talk about that more when we talk about the specific thing. But that is exactly what I'm interested in.
Yeah, me too. Fascinating. Alex.
So currently, all my professional academic career, I'm working on two broad topics: overqualification. So when people think they have more education, skills, abilities, training, work experience for their job, and my other stream is demographic diversity in the workplace. So what happens when you have men and women working together, older, younger people working together, people with different accents, with different skin color. So anything in that demographic diversity space. And so currently my project on overqualification. So why do we still have overqualified people? So why, with all our sophisticated selection procedures, with all our, even the use of artificial intelligence, so we can make selection perfect and we can find perfect candidates, we still have those overqualified people. And my current project is maybe sometimes people just choose jobs for which they're overqualified. Because so yesterday during our poster session, we had a person who said, that they have a friend. She is a dentist. However, currently she's applying for jobs of a dental assistant. And so she has this challenge that they don't want to hire her because they think that there is something fishy. Like, why, if you're a dentist, why do you want to work as a dental assistant? So she was struggling to, secure a job. And then at some point she decided to be honest. She said, look, I want to be a dentist assistant at this point in my career. I don't want additional responsibility. I don't want, this challenging task. I don't want overall role overload. I just want to come to do an interesting job and then to go home to my kids, and to have this work-life balance. And she said, look, I know that I'm overqualified, but this is what I want. It's my choice. And based on research, we know that when it's your choice, when you can explain why you need this job, actually being overqualified can result in all kind of positive outcomes, such as, better health, better psychological, better life satisfaction. People tend to be more satisfied with their lives. They experience a better well-being, work-life balance, and all other good outcomes. And in terms of the workforce diversity, so maybe when we talk about next year, we can talk about our findings in terms of gender, or we're not discussing them, or we can, or we don't know.
Weave it in, Alex.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
reckon.
So, but anyway,
We
so
will.
with diversity, yeah. So I mentioned that my project. So I examine all kinds of diversity: age, gender, and so accents, race, so anything. And my particular area of expertise is why, again, even though we have all those measures, no discrimination, no stereotyping, we still have people engaging in those stereotypical thinking or discriminatory practices. And my research is all about how often it's very subtle. So when men and women innovate, men and women receive different outcomes, because innovation, it's all about challenging the status quo, going against the procedures and the norms. And when women does that, then it's something unexpected, or women is not supposed to be challenging the status quo. So whereas men is something that everyone expects, and when they innovate, so usually men receive better outcomes. So, but this is just one of the example of my research in the diversity space.
Yeah, I acknowledge my privilege, and I will use it.
So it's not just a privilege. So, often stereotypes is a function of ignorance, or so when you actually tell people that was, stereotypical thinking, or that was an example of potentially discriminatory practice. So usually people say, oh, I haven't thought about that. Or, okay, so this is why it's important to talk about that, to become more aware.
Oh yeah, and you hear about it all the time with founders, right? Like the proportion of male to female founders that get funded is ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. So it's something to definitely have a look at, because that will give you some prime examples of where stereotypes are put in, where you've got investors backing different companies based on who the founder is, and a lot of a very big difference in terms of gender. And that's why I was kind of joking around. I acknowledge my privilege. I'm a white, middle-aged male with a decent level of education.
Who isn't going to throw buckets of money at you?
Exactly right. Like, I'm a safe bet. Joseph, thanks for that, Alex. And Joseph.
Excellent, thanks. So my research sits at kind of the intersection of mental health research, individual performance and team performance, and diversity. So I do quite a bit of research actually with Alex. So we've published on topics around the interactions between kind of different types of performance, like being adaptive at work, and how men and women are evaluated differently for being adaptive in the workplace. So our study is actually quite interesting, because as opposed to the research that Alex cited around innovation being rewarded for men, but not being rewarded for women, we actually found that women were actually acknowledged, recognized, and rewarded to a greater extent for their adaptivity as opposed to men, which is actually really good news that the stereotypes don't always favor only men. So research up to now basically has said if you're a woman, if you're a woman rather, it doesn't matter whether you abide by stereotypes or if you break stereotypes. It just has negative outcomes for you. Whereas this research actually is arguably the first to show that sometimes they can actually create favorable outcomes for women. And it's not only favorable outcomes for men. So that's some examples there. Otherwise, the research that I do in mental health is stuff that I'm really passionate about. I see a lot of the potential impact for that, as well as the theoretical contributions. But I think when it comes to mental health, it's just kind of close to my heart. And I see a lot of people who just get very interested and passionate about it, like I am. So some of the work that I'm doing in this space is related to kind of mental health first aid and how do people respond to people who are seeking help. So what is the content of the help that they provide? Can we describe and quantify and qualify differences in the help that people provide to somebody if they come forward with a potential mental health issue or crisis? How do they actually respond? And does the content and the quality of that response shape the trajectory of that person in terms of do they go and seek help? Do they actually feel ashamed after by the response that they've had from you, or do they actually come back to speak to that person again in the future and kind of continue that relationship of openness, or do they seek other types of support such as self-education or potentially seeing a GP? So that's a project that I'm very passionate about. We just finished an amazing an online experiment with pharmacists that actually demonstrated that pharmacists who are working in our communities potentially respond to patients differently when they express the same mental health symptomology of suicidal ideation, whether they are male or female. So very interesting that we know that men have a higher propensity to complete suicide or die by suicide, whereas women might be more likely to attempt. But what we ended up finding was that the pharmacists overwhelmingly were more responsive to men than to women. So there seemed to be a gender bias in terms of their response to a patient presenting with mental health issues, which obviously is very important for us to address through education for pharmacists. So here at the UWA School of Pharmacy, we're working with them to integrate more training in terms of how to address patients that potentially present with suicidal ideation. And the last kind of bucket of research that I do is around interventions. So I'm really passionate about taking research into the field, kind of getting my hands dirty. It's always a little bit trickier than doing things, online experiments or experiments with students. But some of the work I've done is around multidisciplinary team briefings, which are team type activities in operating theaters to try and improve patient safety, team communication, and staff engagement. And then the other type of work that I love to do is stuff that, for example, we're going to talk today around Nexia, kind of introducing a new intervention to see what is the potential benefits and potential downsides of introducing interventions in the workplace so that we can really optimize the experience for employees as well as ensure that they're productive and healthy.
Isn't it great engaging with academics who are just really love the area that they're working in?
Yep.
Yeah. It's good to see enthusiastic academics.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully the cynicism hasn't kicked in, but it doesn't seem like it.
Yeah. Clearly not. Yeah, no, really, really interesting stuff all.
That finding with the pharmacists is a bit alarming.
We're working on changing those, but that again comes back to some of the stuff that Alex was talking about around our stereotypes and how those play out. And it's really, it's important to recognize those stereotypes. And like she said, oftentimes it's a function of ignorance. And those stereotypes are just rules of thumb, right? They're automatic responses that we have. Knowing when those might be kicking in is really important.
Yeah. All right. So, there's so many interesting things that we could talk to there from all of you. So what we are talking with you today about is your field experiment into whether employees should have control over where and when they work. So I guess over to the three of you. Why did you decide to research this topic? Stijn.
I'll start that one because the project started with me, and then I engaged Alex and Joseph. So basically, I went to I went to a conference for academics and industry people. It was actually about incentives, how to reward employees. And I got to talk to somebody from Nexia, and she sort of explained, yeah, we're thinking about revising our incentives. It would be nice to have a chat about it. I went to visit them, talked about it a bit, and maybe thought, yeah, I could have a research project about that. But the more she talked about it, the more I thought, like, you actually don't want to change anything in your incentives. It's going to complicate things. It's going to affect a bunch of other things. What I talked about before, it was immediately in the mindset, no. The way you do things now is connected to how you evaluate your people, how you train them, how you give feedback to them. And now if you're going to give them individual incentives, that might hamper the teamwork. So you don't want to do that. And we started talking a little bit about, they have a good culture here. But one thing that I wanted to introduce more is a formal policy about working from home, because what had happened during the pandemic, they had switched from everybody out of the office and then everybody could go back into the office. And some people had realized that actually they could work pretty well from home and they would like to do that more. I said, that's an interesting story. That's one that I want to investigate. And started talking. I looked around at the university who could be interested in, and because I started with Alex, I actually immediately thought about Alex might be interested in this, and I talked to Joseph as well. I think he worked with my partner, with my wife before, so I also knew a little bit about what he was interested in. Um, so I brought him on board, and that's sort of how it started. They had a practical problem. We stumbled upon it, and the practical problem was twofold. We would like to implement a work from home. It would be good because also we're starting to grow as a company, and maybe we don't have the office space to accommodate everyone. So if we could spread out that time in the office a bit, that would be good. But they weren't sure what the implications would be. They weren't sure whether that would lead to worse performance. They weren't sure whether the employees would actually use that new gained freedom well. And that's what they wanted to test, to trial, to experiment with. So I guess I can hand it over to anyone else now, but that's how it got started.
Yeah, okay. So it was you taking advantage of an opportunity that was presented rather than, I guess, proposing something and finding a company that was interested in exploring that.
Exactly. And I think in general, and I don't know about Alex and Joseph, but in general, that's how my sort of industry projects go. Like, you get to talk to somebody, a network, and you talk about what their problem might be. And sometimes that leads somewhere and sometimes it doesn't. But it's rarely in the case, in my experience, that you literally can go to a company like, I have a great idea, let's try something. If they don't know you up front, it takes some time to create some kind of trusting relationship there.
Yeah. And pleasing to hear that they were being very cautious and thoughtful in their approach to potentially making changes to structures in their organization. And I think probably too often we see organizations just rushing into things because, you know, a new executive thinks that it's going to be a good idea or it's what they did in their last place. And the possible ripple effects of that aren't really understood. So, it would be nice if more companies would take that approach and engage in some caution and some testing of things before launching into a change.
And next year, I think the reason why, so Joseph, the reason why they were so open and receptive to our ideas is because their culture, so they embrace the data, they love the data. So, and remember, so do you remember, guys, we actually, when we started talking, we started from saying, okay, should we maybe have a survey? And then, so our partner from Nexus said, well, we already conducted a survey. And then we started, okay, maybe should we have another survey? And then from those talks, from having a survey, we ended up having a full scale experiment, with control condition, with experimental condition. Everyone in the organization was participating in our survey. So it was, we didn't know that this is what we're going to do, but next year they were very open to embracing, and they really wanted this evidence-based answer to their question. And even when we were discussing our experiment, remember, so our experimental condition was first, okay, should we allow, them working from home 2 days a week, or maybe 3 days a week? And actually, when we were talking to them, we were discussing, okay, is it real flexibility when you say, okay, you can only choose 2 or 3 days? We said, look, in the literature, we say flexibility, it's radical. When you're truly embracing flexibility, you just tell people, look, we don't care when you work, how you work, from what place, as long as you do your work. And again, the beauty of our organization next year was that they say, let's do it. They were very, upfront and open, and they were embracing this, the true spirit of research. So, and this is what we did. We said, okay, and remember, actually, when we were already ready to start a project, this is when I think the borders open up and we started getting COVID in Western Australia. So our experiment at that time, remember, maybe you already forgot, our experiment was that close to, to not happening, because it's again was everyone working from home. But then I think we still went with the experiment and we conducted. So maybe Joseph can talk about how we actually did that.
Yeah, actually, yeah, on the Alex, I know how from personal experience how difficult it is to run a control condition in a real life field intervention. So, kudos to you for being able to get that up. So it'd be really interesting, Jared. Yeah, if you can unpack how the experiment was designed.
Joseph.
Oh, sorry,
I
Joseph. Who did I
I
empower
say?
said Jared.
Jared. I don't know what. Yeah, sorry. It's
I also
after
respond to
for
hey
the
you.
podcast listeners. It is after lunch, and this is usually my nap time.
We're on the same schedule then, Mitchell. Perfect. So basically the way that it worked, like Alex and Stijn mentioned, we were so lucky that Nexia just embraced us. To be perfectly honest, there was no boulder to be pushed up this hill, and what we ended up doing was we did a kind of a launch party, if you will. So what project doesn't need a good launch party? So we had a bit of a launch party. They welcomed all of their staff along to hear from us about what we had planned to do. And essentially, what we did was we did a baseline survey with all of the employees. So there are 86 employees at Nexia, and they all did a baseline survey. And at the presentation, we randomly assigned them to either group A or group B. So this is really so exciting for us, because how many times do organizations let you randomly assign all of their employees? So it wasn't random assignment by team, it was random assignment by employee, which means that even within their own teams, half of those individuals, right, were working under one condition, half of them on the other. So it was really allowing us the full kind of control that you would get from this kind of random controlled field experiment. So it was really exciting for us. We did the presentation where we broke everybody up into groups A and B. And then essentially the next week, we gave them the instructions that group A would be experiencing this radical flexibility that Alex described, meaning they could work from anywhere and anytime. So they had full control, autonomy over where they worked and how, like, the hours that they kept, right? And essentially, after 3 weeks of this, they would switch places. So group B would then have the opportunity to experience radical flexibility. Group A would go back to business as usual. What we did along the way that was really exciting was every single week we did a survey for all of the employees as well as their supervisors, which allowed us to track their individual experiences across their entire span for their experimental and their control condition. So we could control and we can actually examine their own experience within both of those conditions, as well as within between the conditions. And it also allowed us to triangulate the results with supervisor reports, which of course are very important when you're thinking about an organization. Sometimes we only think about, are the employees happier, but are there issues around that the supervisors are noticing? So we were able to triangulate it. And then, of course, everything has to come to a conclusion. So after 6 weeks of this experiment, we concluded, and shortly thereafter, we provided a feedback presentation. And I have to say, people at Nexia were amazing. We had such a great response rate. And the only incentive that we had to provide them, we discussed a lot about incentivization, and I'm sure you guys have thought about rewards like Stijn has. And all they wanted was morning tea. So we made sure to whip out a good high quality morning tea, and we had some smaller prizes. But overall, we had a great response rate.
Yeah. How big is Nexia in terms of headcount?
So there, that particular office is 86, but Nexia, this is only Nexia Perth.
Yeah.
Nexia has branches across Australasia. And we can talk a little bit later maybe, but our collaborator at Nexia presented our results at the Nexia Australasia conference to kind of inform other departments about, or other branches about how to use flexible work.
Hi listeners, Jason here. We hope you're enjoying this latest podcast episode. Now, if you're like Joelle, Alicia and myself and enjoy learning from the best, then the Flourish DX Academy is for you. The Academy includes free e-learning courses on the ISO 45003 standard for psychological health and safety at work, and associated topics such as how to conduct a psychosocial risk assessment and how to create the business case for psych health and safety. All courses feature high-quality videos, downloadable resources, multi-choice questions, and a downloadable training certificate on completion. Take your learning to the next level with all Flourish DX Academy courses included within the Flourish DX mobile app. Select podcast episodes from the Psych Health and Safety podcast and sister podcasts from Canada and the USA are also included. Get started with Flourish DX for free at www.flourishdx.com/get-started. That's www.flourishdx.com/get-started. Now back to this episode. Yeah, we'll unpack those results in a moment. Stijn, did you have something else to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, like when you said the issue of implementing a control condition or whatever, or randomization in a field, and the field itself is often difficult. And I think one of the things that we were lucky with that they gave us enough time, so that, as Joseph said, that we could give everyone the chance for at least 3 weeks to work under the new policy. So it wasn't the case that we had like the lucky 50% who got to try the new thing and the unlucky 50% that had to do whatever was going on. Like we did that for a bunch of reasons. We did that for statistical reasons, because it gives us a little bit more chance of fighting smaller effects. But the main reason why we wanted to do that is because it is just fairer, right? To give every employee the chance to work under the new work from home policy, to try it out, and it gives more information to the company as a whole. Everybody has tried it out. Are we happy with it? Are we not happy with it? So I think going forward, that is sort of a mental note that I made for myself. If I ever get the chance to work with a company like that again, that seemed to be like a really good strategy for us as researchers, but it's a really good strategy as well to say, look, this is not just experimenting. You can see this as a trial, and everybody tries it out for 3 weeks, and then we reevaluate.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of important notes there. If you fundamentally believe that your intervention is actually going to be beneficial in any way to employees, it's kind of unethical, right, to not give that benefit to a certain group. And so having a waitlist condition, as you've described, where they're going to get the intervention at some point, but they're just obviously operating as a control group to start with, then I think that's ethically the right thing to do. But then it's also, like you said, Joseph, that the only thing that the employees wanted was a morning tea. Well, actually being able to do and try out, flexible working arrangements was probably reward in itself, right? Going, hey, we're going to come in and check out like how you find this, but maybe their employer wouldn't have done it if they didn't have the three of you actually backing it up with the research project and the design of the experiment.
Well, yeah, that's for that. Now we can tell people that we are the incentive in and of ourselves. I love it. And then I'll point them to this podcast.
But honestly, that's also literally what we did, right? We said, look, we are collecting the information. We did a lot of work because we had a lot of surveys, which actually means you want to track people over time, but you don't want to get the feeling that they're monitored or tracked and that that's going to go back to the company. What you want to go back to the company is the overall results. On average, people are happier, but you don't want to say person X is complaining and person Y is happy. And so the fact that we were 3 independent researchers, I think genuinely helped to get better responses. And that's not because we're geniuses or something. It's just that because we are independent and we went through a lot of effort to keep an anonymity, to keep everyone informed about what it was about, that we weren't trying to trick them into doing anything. So I do think there is a genuine point to that, like that where we can come in and provide some value.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's always a role for external consultants when you're trying to get that unbiased, objective, more insight and giving that shield, I guess, of anonymity between the employee experience and the employer. So there's a lot of value in that for sure.
And it also speaks a lot to their culture because so they really wanted to get the data based on themselves, and they understand the important, maybe because they're accountants, right? So we also had to bust some myths about accountants while we were getting ready for this project. So, but they wanted that, and we told them that we are going to present the results based on the data that you will provide, and people got it. We didn't have to persuade them too long why it's important to get the data based on themselves.
Yeah, I think accountants would always get that. I just love it. We always get asked for a benchmark, like how are we going against other organizations? And then they want to tell us why the benchmark isn't appropriate. They're like, what industry was that from and what state or what country or was it pre-COVID or post-COVID? And like they'll come up with a million reasons why the benchmark doesn't apply. And so that internal benchmark, right, using the company's own data is so valuable to help them to understand the value of doing these things. So we always say your best benchmark is your own data.
Absolutely.
But we do also have an
external
benchmark as
just
well.
to appease some people, but we always get like 10 questions around like what or
here's the benchmark, and now you're going to tell us why it's irrelevant to you. But here you go anyway. Yeah. So I'm interested to hear whether the experiment ran smoothly or how smoothly did it go? You mentioned that it almost the WA borders opening almost destroyed everything for you. Any other hiccups or challenges that you can share?
When we got the question, I made some notes about it, and actually I had never thought about it, but except for the border opening, I was incredibly surprised how well it went, because there was a ton of data collection, like weekly surveys. We needed to get buy-in. And I think sort of the thing that we did prepare it very well. And we are a pretty complementary team in terms of making sure that they trust us, explaining things from different points of view helps. And like my skills are more technical, and that's what I thought about. But like we used Qualtrics, the survey platform. And just to get to the data from the supervisors about the people that work for them, I had to do some unholy things with Qualtrics to get that like on the screen for them. And we had that, but then we had the morning teas. Joseph spent a lot of time in organizing that and sort of master of ceremonying the introduction that we did. And like I was incredibly pleased that except for external things, the experiment actually ran pretty smoothly. And again, it's also partially Nexia itself that was very accommodating and very helpful, and sending out reminders for surveys and so on. My impression was that this was incredibly easy to do in hindsight.
So I guess that probably speaks to I guess, the engagement strategy up front before you actually started assigning people to groups and doing the data collection? How much time sort of went into that in terms of actually prepping the organisation and doing that sort of comms and engagement piece?
Yeah, so for us that was a lot. So in terms of months, was it on the one hand, okay, so it was a couple of months for sure, which from the research perspective, that was very quick because so we needed to quickly find the measures, put them in a survey, test, pilot test, pre-test, then discuss what variables to include. I still remember when we were discussing our model and what could change and what couldn't. Just Stijn is laughing. So we said, okay, how about we test a work-life balance? And I remember one of my collaborators said, Alex, these are accountants. They don't care about work-life balance.
That's not what I said.
And we had back and forth saying, but wait, they're people, but maybe, okay, just can it be my my pet project? Can we please put that measure just in case if it doesn't work for accountants, but maybe it will work for something else? And we were so surprised that actually one of the findings was that work-life balance improved. And it was when we were presenting this finding, I think people were either surprised or that was something meaningful. So so it was a couple of months, and for us it felt really lots of time preparation, because usually research, if you're thinking about a PhD project, it's usually a 3-year project with daily work. So a couple of months.
And 6 months of just getting ethics approval.
So, yeah. Exactly, right? So exactly.
I forgot about that. I memory hold that.
Oh, yes.
That was not fun.
Yes.
Because it was so complicated.
Oh, yes, I remember. Yes. So did we
Yeah.
get back and forward from our ethics committee? Yes.
Because of the anonymity, and that wasn't easy. But I'm happy we did it because it provided that sort of that proof that we were truly making an effort, and that it got signed off on. And the actual process, I think we had multiple meetings with the HR person who was sort of our contact lead at first, and sort of discussing sort of the possibilities, and then we narrowed it down to this design more or less. Then we had a meeting with sort of the directors and managers, a separate meeting to sort of think about, okay, what are their concerns? Why do they think it might work, might not work? Taking some of those things into account. And we had a launch on their year. They have a yearly start of the year, end of the year conference type thing internally. And we were given like 15-20 minutes, I think, to introduce the project as well there. So we really went through multiple months of working with them, and sort of communicating at every level of the company, like with our leads, with let's say the CEO, with the managers, then communicating directly to the employees who would be involved. So it was a ton of preparation, but yeah, super happy we did it. And I think in a certain way, because we could do such a rigorous experiment, it was worth it for us. It wasn't just another survey. It felt like we could do more, and it would have an immediate impact. They would make a decision based on the outcome as well. So yeah, but it was a ton of preparation.
Yeah. Amazing. Like you say, there wasn't too many hiccups because you guys obviously planned and put a lot of prep in up front. So the question that all of our listeners have been waiting for almost an hour to hear, what were the results?
Excellent. I'm staring at them, so maybe I'll take this one. So basically, what we ended up really caring about, there were a couple different criteria that we used to evaluate our results and what made a successful intervention. So as Alex already alluded to, one of the areas was really around kind of employee well-being. So of course, we were really interested. One of the primary reasons that you might expect flexibility to be useful is because it can support employee well-being, because you have more control over where and when you work. So that might help with your work-life balance. So as Alex mentioned, And as you would probably expect, right, we did find that the flexibility condition did suggest that there would be better work-life balance. But then we also did find that employees working under the flexibility condition also reported better mental health. So we used the kind of mental health inventory to assess that, which is essentially capturing subclinical levels of depression and anxiety. So we're actually talking about, a serious indicator of mental health, which did improve under the flexibility condition. So that was really lovely to see. And on the flip side, things that we didn't see, but that were probably equally important, right, was the fact that the organization is a one-stop shop, if you will, for accounting services. So they are very much focused on the client experience, the service that is provided to their clients, right? And this is the bread and butter of what they do. So they were very concerned about whether having their employees working flexibly might have an adverse impact on the experience for their customers. And what we did not find was that there was an impact, a negative impact for that customer experience. So that was really quite kind of good news, if you will, that you didn't see kind of this detrimental impact from people working flexibly. So they were given the autonomy to work at home, work in the office. They could go and visit the client, schedule their appointments when it suited them, and they could meet the client at different locations. So sometimes they would choose a location closer to their home, for example. They would go to the client's office or they would meet in the office, but we didn't see a detrimental impact there. And then the third area that we were particularly concerned about and our partner was worried about was around kind of that teamwork. And we've alluded to this kind of culture that the organization had. And essentially, one of the kind of potential issues around providing people flexibility could be that maybe when people start working from home more often or outside of the office, it starts eroding some of the teamwork and that kind of culture in the organization. Well, again, we didn't find evidence for a negative impact of the flexibility on team communication or coordination, both of which are indicators of team effectiveness and your ability to work together. So that was really exciting. So we were both excited by what we did find, as well as some of the non-significant, statistical results. That also suggest, that it's not just a function of us watching them, that these things happened, right? So we're not really the likelihood that this is all kind of a Hawthorne type of effect, right? The function of people just being watched would actually be arguably rather small, because if it really was a Hawthorne effect, well, they would have seen increases in all of the different dimensions. Probably their KPI number one is around client service, right? So if you were to try and inflate everything, surely we would have seen some type of increased customer service indicators, but none of those were reported. So that was actually quite interesting and useful for us to be able to pin down the kind of relative advantages of that flexibility for employees.
Yeah, and obviously the fact that you had a control group, right, that you were taking measures from while the other group were going through the intervention condition would also quash some of those concerns.
Mm.
Not always available to do in field interventions, unfortunately.
No, we felt very lucky.
And maybe,
yeah, terrific. Yeah, sorry, go, Alex.
Oh, sorry. So maybe, and this is the case where when you don't find significant results, it's a good result. So basically, we told them, look, the level of team coordination, the level of customer service didn't change. So people provided equally high levels of, customer service in both conditions. So if this is what you're worried about, you shouldn't, because the productivity, the output stays the same. But good news is that they become happier, they become, more satisfied with their work-life balance. That again improves the culture of the organization.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, there's some myths out there that are kind of making these return to work mandates happen, right? Like, we need better team cohesion. You guys need to come in on a Tuesday or Wednesday because you need to meet with your team to be able to ensure that that teamwork continues. But what you're saying is that if you're fully flexible, like was in this particular example, that there actually was no detrimental effect on team dynamics.
There were no differences, statistically significant differences. And I still remember, even when we were designing the flexibility condition, we were actually discussing with our partners, okay, so but what about team coordination? What if one of your team members is in the flexibility condition and the other is in the control? How are they going to coordinate? Should we give them guidance? And first we started giving guidance. Okay, if you're in the flexibility condition, you need to warn your business partners. And then we said, look, flexibility means flexible. We even came across, I don't know, in the literature, there is this constricted flexibility or control flexibility. We said, look, if there is some control or constrictions, this is not flexibility. And then we decided, you know what? Flexibility means absolutely flexible. It's up to them. They're adults. They will decide how they will coordinate with their team members, and the reason, remember, we also have qualitative comments. Some of the employees said that even for their clients meetings, they were happier because for some clients meetings, it was easier for them to go to the client side from their home, not from the work. So, and this is why they were happier about flexibility.
Yeah, and we've definitely observed some of those things. So those are all kind of things that you're hoping to demonstrate as well, and hopefully were expected to in terms of outcomes. Were there any surprises out of your findings?
I'll go with the one that Alex already alluded to. My sense, my initial skepticism of work-life balance was I thought of that as being more a structural issue, like something that you can't like solve in 3 weeks. That was basically what I was afraid of. And looking at some other studies, like looking at the effect sizes they found in sort of hypothetical experiments, the effect was not too big, and I was afraid we have a relatively small organization. Work-life balance, we might not change that with an intervention of 3 weeks. That was actually my fear, and what I thought, why are we including them? And like Alex said, the effect was actually pretty big. And to me, sort of from the qualitative results that we find is we don't really find that people are like saying now, oh, we have complete flexibility. I'm going to stay home 4 days a week. What we actually find is that what they expressed in their survey before we did the experiment, they said, we would like to have that flexibility to stay home 2 full days a week or like 1 day and 2 afternoons. That's the type of flexibility that we want. And that's more or less what we saw as well. So my interpretation of our finding of the work-life balance is it's basically you need to do the groceries, but the shops are going to close. So you want to have that afternoon free, and then you work when you're back. You have to bring your kid to the dentist. You can't do that after 6, so you want to have the flexibility to arrange your work in that afternoon so that you can go to the dentist. You have a client meeting 50 kilometers from the office. You don't want to come into the office, sit there an hour, and then drive. So it's that's those like relatively practical things got solved immediately. It didn't need a big structural change. It's just that flexibility to use your time as you want, but still do the work so that clients are not harmed, team is not harmed. That for me drove the improve in mental health, drove the improvements in work-life balance. And I was surprised by how big the effect was, how it was there for almost everyone.
Stijn, can I just say, we have conversations about that sort of thing all the time. And in fact, I had one just before this podcast recording where a customer is deciding whether they go about doing a psychosocial risk assessment because they are concerned about the systemic failures that are going to be shown through the consultation with workers. And it's going to take a lot of work to do the intervention. And that might be costly, time consuming, whatever, because they're big, like you say, structural issues. But like you say, a lot of these things actually are pretty simple when you just start taking some sort of action, and can have, like you say, quite large impact on people's mental health and well-being as well. So I think sometimes people are paralyzed thinking, oh, structural change, or if we're going to improve something like work-life balance, that's really a big initiative, and we're going to need a lot of resourcing behind it. But often they're not, right?
Yeah, I agree. I'm a big fan of incremental small changes that add up to big structural changes over time.
Yeah. I think the bigger thing is to just get started with something rather than get paralyzed by fear, that thinking that everything was going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort. But really interesting.
So that probably leads into the next question around what learnings would you like employers to take from your research?
I'll let the specialists go first.
Yeah, so no, I just wanted to say that our project showed us that flexibility these days shouldn't be treated as something extra or something that employees give only to certain employees. Flexibility must be a core element of any work. So because we know that flexibility is good for everyone, it doesn't result in any detriments in terms of performance or the core business, but it makes people happier, more satisfied with their life, better mentally healthier. So flexibility shouldn't be something that you negotiate or you request for certain days. It really should be a core characteristic of any workplace.
I think one thing to add there is really around trusting your employees. So this was really a key element of kind of the culture in that organization. And I still remember in several of the meetings we had with the CEO, he just kept on reiterating, we are just trusting our employees to do the right thing, and it was not followed by a whole list of conditions about what the right thing was. It was just do the right thing by the business, do the right thing by the clients, and do the right thing by their teams. And I think demonstrating that you trust your employees by giving them this autonomy, this control over such a fundamental component of their work was actually really reciprocated by the employees through kind of that high level of performance. They maintained that level of performance. It didn't kind of turn into this, quiet quitting phenomena that we saw. People didn't take advantage of it. And they reap the benefits of that. So I think that's really important. And I'm going to totally steal your idea, Mitchell. And I'm just going to say that one of the key findings that organizations should take from this is that small incremental changes can have a profound impact on your employees' experience. So, to kind of take a risk to try something new, and even if it's a small intervention, get some backing from different levels of the organization, from the top all the way through the bottom. Involve your employees in that process so that your intervention has the best chances of success.
Just for our podcast listeners, there is not a Mitchell on the call. Joelle, unfortunately, has two first names in her name, so it's Joelle Mitchell. But that's all right. I called Joseph Jarrett earlier. He's called me Mitchell, so I think we're fair. It's Jason. Nice to meet you, Joseph.
Sorry, I thought that we had organized this, but I threw away my Post-it halfway through.
We did. That's why, anyway. Hilarious. I think Stijn was going to add something in there too.
Yeah. So I focus, we have the same basic understanding of the results, but I think I focus more on the latter part, that I don't think that flexibility is core, to be honest. I think it is a function of what the company is already doing, whether it can work or not. I think the culture at Nexia was, and the fact that they actually already had a culture of involving and surveying and actually acting on the information they got, that they have a pretty good management structure that they trust, that they sort of trust the middle level managers to manage their own team. I think that is a precondition to sort of get that, and gets to your earlier example of the Queensland government as well. If you just add these 5 extra days, but the management structure around this doesn't support it, it's probably not going to be good for mental health. It's probably going to give more stress of, can I actually take up those extra days? And that's something we found in the experiment. I remember in the study, when we talked to the HR people, they said, look, it is possible in some teams for people to take work from home even before the study, but in other teams it's not. And what our experiment did is basically equalize the policy for everyone. It's everybody could say, if you're in the 3 weeks where you're in the treatment group, you can take time off. And we saw a catching up effect. It was especially the people who didn't take a lot of work from home days before now started doing it. So I think that sort of stresses that it is part, you can implement work from home in a bad way. And if you don't have the right management structure or the trust, as Joseph calls it, there is actually a chance that you might implement it in the wrong way. And the second thing for me, the second takeaway was the experimenting. Like I dug a little bit in the literature, and one thing that was fine that in Australia, the work from home policies, the hybrid policy that we sort of, you have to come into, well, you're expected to be in the office sometime, but you can work from home other times. That's actually hasn't increased so much in Australia during the pandemic compared to the US, where it has been a 25% uptick in hybrids. And one of the explanations for that is the US was much more harder hit by the pandemic. Firms were forced to experiment. They were forced to try out new work arrangements, and they realized actually it's not too bad. Basically, what we did in a very small setting, we experimented, we found out the fears that some people had in management were myths, we busted them, and we started doing it. And so small experimenting, small trialing shows us information of work from home is not too bad if we set it up right. And that's the other thing that I sort of learned. Small trials, good idea. Talk to your employees, find out what they really want. Try to see whether that actually you can make that work. And if it works, you can implement it. And that's how our study went.
And also, can I just add, also, it's not just a culture of trust, but also they truly care about their employees. Because remember how when we were discussing the experimental condition, we first said, okay, it's only full-time employees and managers. And then Nexus said, okay, but what about our part-time employees? And so we were discussing, okay, they're already, working 3 days a week. And then they said, no, look, everyone must participate. So they involve part-time employees. And also remember how they were saying, okay, but what about receptionists? We really need them to be in the office. So they shouldn't participate in the experiment. And then again, they said, well, no, everyone must experience it. So, and at the end, everyone, part-time, full-time, client-facing, non-client-facing, everyone participated in this experiment because they said it's really important for them to ensure that everyone feels that they belong to the organization and they're also part of something big that they're trying to, or even something that they're trying to implement. Yeah.
So how did they? That's an interesting point for me because I think there are roles or positions or even organisations where something like this flexible work is just not practicable. For example, if you're running a supermarket, you need people working on the floor in the supermarket, doing the shelf stocking and that sort of thing, and you need to have coverage and all of those sorts of things. So how was the position of the reception managed then in that situation?
So when we're discussing that, and first when they said, oh, it's not possible, then they remember themselves. They said, look, but remember when we all had to work from home, that was a mandate, we all did. So they said even their receptionists, somehow they had their phones, redirecting to home. They were using those, Zoom or whatever. So they said, we managed that. And for other occupations, for example, maybe it's not flexibility so that suddenly you need to be in the supermarket and you're working from home. But maybe there is a flexibility in terms of when they start their working day, when they finish their working day, when they have their lunch break. So something that they can decide using their own personal circumstances.
Yeah, so we've got degrees of flexibility as opposed to just on or off. Yeah.
I think for the receptionists as well, there was a professional pride that they wanted as a team. They wanted to have at least one person at the reception at all time during office hours. But what the flexibility was implemented amongst themselves. There were 3 part-time people not all 50-50. Like, it was a bit complicated, but they just like they sort of smoothed it out over a couple of weeks so that everybody had the amount of time that they were supposed to work would work and not more. But they discussed it amongst each other who would be there and when, but there would always be somebody in person, and somebody could work from home to do more like telephones. But they had I think that's sort of the right combination that they had. It sort of illustrates again in a microcosm the fact that the employees used the flexibility to balance out their own work-life balance, but also make sure that the job was done, that like the core function was still fulfilled. So yeah, that's I think where it comes in. Like you need that baseline trust in the company, or the baseline sort of professional pride that you want to do a good job as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and a level of collegiality within
Yeah.
that team would be vital
Mm.
as
Yeah.
well, I would
Otherwise, you
imagine.
just get the mature age student doing all the work and the under.
Everybody else loafing.
Yeah.
I
So-
have no idea what you're talking about. Please.
But that's a really a good takeaway as well, right? Like if you manage the outcomes and give then employees more control over how the outcomes are achieved, they'll come up with creative solutions that management aren't necessarily going to see.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like that idea. So hey, if someone who's employed to stock shelves can work out how to do that remotely, good on them. Like,
But I do think for one, that's what I thought. Like you do have like the flexibility in those kind of jobs can almost be more thought of as planning. Like if those type of employees only know when they're what work they're gonna do, like on the evening before the day they can start to work, that in a way it is flexible, but from the employer's point of view, while if they know what they're going to have to do for the whole week, that gives them flexibility to fill in those other. So sometimes like planning can help to give some flexibility. And then if you know the plan for the whole week, you can talk, if there is this collegiality, you can talk to your colleagues and say, Thursday afternoon really doesn't fit me. Can I switch for your Monday afternoon? So again, I immediately thought about that when that example comes up. It's sort of like if you have a good management structure broadly defined in place, that can actually then open up the freedom for collegiality, for trust, for that flexibility then within the plan to create a better work-life balance and actual flexibility for the employees.
Yeah, and a great point as well. So role clarity, understanding not what is your job description, but like on a weekly basis, what are you going to be required to do? What's your what are the priorities? But then also work scheduling. And I know Joelle and the team did a project recently where one of the biggest concerns was actually not around work overload, but just like last minute scheduling of shifts, which didn't give people a lot of time for that flexibility or planning ahead, right? So yeah. This we could talk to you guys all day, but it is a long format podcast. And Stijn, I know you like listening to 3 or 4 hour podcasts, but this is not one of those.
No, our longest is about 90 minutes.
Yeah, and we're heading that way now.
Yeah.
So we're gonna rush through to the end now. So look, guys, fantastic research, really interesting findings. Great that you're able to dispel some myths there. I really think that our listeners are going to get a lot out of this episode. And I'll be promoting it broadly because I've really enjoyed it.
Me too.
But one of the questions that I like to ask all of our guests when they come on the podcast, and given we've got 3 people on here, what I might do is go to the person who's declared the most interest in mental health as a passion, which was Joseph. So, Joseph, what are your hopes for the future of workplace mental health?
Oh, put me on the spot there. I really think that my hopes for the future of workplace mental health is really that it's not the exception, but it's really the norm, that our work lives can really foster our mental health and not be seen as kind of a drain. And I think that's really the fundamental change that I would love to see in kind of how we talk about mental health. And oftentimes we hear a lot about people attributing poor mental health to their experiences at work, whether those are based on workload, their shifts, how their work is constructed, the interpersonal experiences that they have. And my real hope is that in the future, we'll hear a lot more of those positive stories about how work can actually support and bolster and help us grow as individuals and support our mental health. So my sincere hope is that narrative will kind of be flipped on its head. And in the future, we'll be talking much more about how work can help us flourish and support our mental health as opposed to be a detriment.
Fantastic. And if we get there in the next few years, I'll be very happy. Might be a longer term aspiration, but we'll work towards it. Incremental
It'll put me out of
improvements.
research, so
So our last question is words of advice, and I might just reframe that a little bit. Words of advice for organisations who maybe like this idea of doing sort of a field experiment or trialing something. Any words of advice for them? And I might start with Stijn.
My main advice is do it. Like that would be my main thing. I'm really big on small trials, incremental, trying things out. My limited experience to Australian industry is that slagging a bit. Like Australian companies are not that keen on trialing out things, especially in this HR mental health space. They're interested in it, but sort of trialing. If you trial it, I do think you need to do it like seriously. You need to take it seriously. I teach a little bit about change management, and one of the big takeaways from everyone, and that's what is not going to surprise you, is like management can't think up what the best policy will be. You can't just look at best practices. You need to talk to your own employees and what they want, and you need to start from there. What their needs are, how do you think they do the work day in, day out? Like they know the pain points that you might never think about. So that would be my biggest advice. If you trial something, talk to your employees. Look for champions in your organizations who might explain to you what needs to be changed and who might talk to the other employees about why it would be a good idea. And if you want to do it very rigorously, maybe get some academics/consultants involved, if only to keep some distance, so if only to get some independent people involved, which might help you to sort of create like that. You're not just coming in to introduce one of the new, like you said before, the new manager comes in, has a great idea, and he uses the consultant/academic to push through that idea. That's not what you want as an academic or a consultant. So that would be the other thing. Get some people involved for independent review, because that might actually make it easier to sell.
Yep. All good advice. Alex, anything to add?
Yes, organizations, if you want experiments, come to the trio, the best experimental researchers ever, Alex, Stijn, and Joseph. We've got the framework, we've got tools. Yeah, we can help you. So.
And for a low price.
$0. We actually paid for tea.
Maybe we shouldn't market that too broadly.
I was gonna say, despite what you might think from the podcast, we can do meetings under 30 minutes as well.
Yeah.
I think we're done.
Guys.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. Fantastic. This has been one of my favorite podcast episodes.
Wowzers.
Yeah, I like the nerdy ones. Not saying that you guys are nerds, unless you take that as a compliment, and in which case you are nerds and very passionate nerds about the areas that you work in, which is great. Love to hear it. And you guys, I think Adam Grant, if you guys wanted to take up podcasting, could give him a good challenge. You can definitely take the research and make it very practical and applied. So well done to all of you guys on a fantastic piece of work.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. It was great. So thank you. So now the Psychology, Health and Safety Made Simple podcast is one of my, I'm going to add on my podcast list now.
Terrific. You'll find some great episodes on there. So thanks again, guys. And listeners, that brings us to the end of a super long episode generally for us, but a good episode. Remember, we do video these when we have our guests on, so you can catch out the video on the FlourishDX YouTube page. You will also find that we'll take short snippets, and there'll be a few from this episode for sure that we'll be sharing on the FlourishDX LinkedIn page. While you're over on LinkedIn, you'll find myself and Joelle, and you'll probably find the 3 researchers over there as well if you'd like to connect and maybe get some free research done. That's it, listeners. We'll catch you next episode.
You've been listening to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast. To stay up to date with the latest on psychological injury prevention, follow FlourishDX on LinkedIn and subscribe to the Psych Health and Safety Podcast at www.psychealthandsafety.com.